All right, so let's get started. Why doesn't everybody close their laptops? Because I'm sure you're just working on all sorts of awesome things. I'm sure you're taking notes, but we will just take notes on paper. So we'll be okay. All right. And we'll all take our phones and flip them over a la this, because this is what you would do in an appointment, right? You're not picking up your phone in the middle of sitting with somebody. So for writing offers, we had talked about this yesterday, and I'm going to update this because all of you are with mentors. And so we are going to, it's going to be either you, your mentor, or me approving your offers before you're sending them to signature while you're writing them. I know a couple of you, I think you're already, I don't even know if we ever did approve yours, but I think you're past, you know how to write them. And so for the new guys, it'll be, you'll tag like me and your mentor, and then whoever is first available is just going to look it over. And then hopefully stuff like, I forgot to check the appraisal like I did on one of my first deals, we would catch that stuff. And then that's for probably the first, it's just going to depend on what your level is. I would say it's probably the first like 3 to 6 months, and wherever you land on stuff. You know, those of us that have been in the business before and we're just moving over, it may be a much shorter time, because obviously you're just tweaking a couple of things to how we write it. So I wanted to talk about this with closing costs, talking with your buyer. So this is my rule of thumb. I know I liked what Ben went over yesterday, giving kind of a good rule of thumb of like where the percentage lands in the price point. Do you guys remember that? Maybe? Say that again. Where Ben went over where the percentage lands with what price point range. Mm-hmm. So I think that's super helpful. And then on the flip side of things, this is kind of my mantra that I use. If they are cash or conventional buyers putting like 10% plus down, I am never talking about lender or title fees. Those guys have, like Tanner had said, you know, they're bringing like 80,000 down, and it's like they've got the other 6 or 7 for the stuff. So I am never bringing it up. They are paying their own fees. So if this is where you get into, if it's the first time buyer, FHA, VA, that sort of thing, the way you want to frame the conversation is not when they've found the house. It's when you're sitting down with them and you're telling them, hey, I want you to know, because you're first time or you're VA or FHA, you know, closing costs are the buyer's responsibility. So what is it, you know, and you go through, like I think Faith has a good thing that she does, where she will go through and say like, hey, the appraisal, $500 to $600, the inspections are, you know, $500 or so, pest inspection is this, our transaction fee is this, closing costs run about this. So then it's all like written out. And they know, hey, these are all of the buyer fees. The seller is not responsible for your fees, but if we need to work it into the deal, then the purchase price has to go up for you to finance it in. So then you can have that conversation up front rather than having it when they have found the house, you're in a multiple offer situation, and or, you know, all sorts of things happen. It's just better to tell them up front. So, and asking them, because I've had VA guys where they paid, it is a lie straight from the pit of hell that VA buyers cannot pay for their own closing costs. It's like a total, so we're gonna go through some VA stuff, but VA is awesome because there is no cap on what you can ask for. I did a deal and we asked for 9%, and we covered, they truly didn't have 2 cents to rub together. We covered all their stuff. I think I had to get an extra 2%, and it worked out beautifully. So I'll show you.
Sorry,
go.
How far did you go above asking price to get that?
It actually had been on the market for a while, so we might have been a little bit over to cover, but they ended up, like their net to seller was less than the asking price. And that's something good, like Tanner had to do that recently with one of your buyers, Sarah, where you have to talk to them. They're like, well, I'm making a full price offer. Well, no, you're not. You are making a $199.9 and you're trying to ask for 6% back. That is actually this net to seller. Like, I have legit had buyer's agents get pissed at me and say, well, we made you a full price offer. And I'm like, no, you didn't. It says on the front page, yeah, but then you flip back here and there are all these concessions. This is not a full price offer. And if your people want all this crap, then the price needs to be at $215. And I'm totally fine with that. So having that conversation up front will definitely help. And then if they're with IMG, obviously that's a super easy conversation because you can call up the lender and be like, tell me what's going on. Like, can they cover some of this? Do they need all of it? Do they have money? So the 3 to 5% conventional, guys, this is a total gray area. Like, these are your up and coming. They may have money, they may not. You know, their credit is obviously better because they're getting into conventional financing. So you've just kind of got to use your judgment from the buyer profile. Like, listen to, have they been buying houses? How do they sound? And it's like, if it sounds like they've got money, don't bring it up. If it sounds like they are just getting into the point of, hey, I just got moved from qualifying for FHA and now I finally qualify for conventional, then you may need to just have the same conversation that you have with these guys. So obviously, best case scenario, they're getting lending with IMG and you can just call up Ben and Peyton, Brianna, have them look at stuff, tell me, can they cover half their closing costs or whatever, okay? Any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 4% on the VA, that's max that the sellers can give concessions, correct?
No, VA has no max.
Then what? Okay.
Yeah.
What's the 4% on this?
Oh, it runs about 3 to 4% of the purchase price.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that on the matrix? I don't know.
4%.
Does he
Yeah.
have 4%? It's
Yes,
not. On
because
VA?
That's why I was having issues.
Okay. I'll definitely ask because I've done a 9% VA deal. And yeah, it goes further in because there are times, like, especially when VA is not using our lender, I go through it later. We'll get to it. So, okay, so you've gotten an accepted offer, all right? So it's always all about pre-framing, and this is the conversation that you want to have. So you call up and you're like, hey, Mr. Buyer, congratulations. You're officially under contract. Here are the next steps. So I've turned in your file to my assistant for processing. They're gonna send you a copy as well as to the lender and title company. My assistant is going to get your home and pest inspections ordered. Once those inspections are complete, the inspector will send you an email to pay for it online. Then they're going to release the report to you to review. Remember, no perfect house. So we're looking for major items. We don't want to nitpick the seller to death. So you're saying all of this before they're getting like, oh my gosh, we need 12 GFIs. I need to cancel the deal, And then you tell them, please make your earnest money check payable to Smoky Mountain Title. In the memo line, reference, the address, mail it here. Before you drop it in the mail, please text me a picture of it. And this just helps, like, you're controlling what is happening next, okay? Because it's like now, it's very easy. Like, our buyers don't go and try to pick out bad inspectors, meaning like AccuSpec, pillar to post. There are guys that, like, there was one of my first home inspectors I ever met, and I can't remember who he worked for, but his nickname was, and he proudly wore it around, was the deal killer. Like, he loved that he went in and killed deals because he was so brutally honest. And it's like, you've got to have that conversation, especially with the first-time home buyer guys. Listen, you're buying a house, you're building equity and wealth and whatever it is here. If you are concerned about maintenance, you need to stay in an apartment, man. You need to, like, whenever you pull up your big boy britches, then give me a call. But if you're, like, freaked out about gutters and, GFCIs, this is probably not the step for you to make, okay? So the lender is going to continue to ask you for many docs. This is what Chris went over, but I had already had this in. So please be mindful that submitting everything within 24 hours of request to submit everything within 24 hours of request so there aren't delays. And then these are kind of like, I don't know if there are 10, are there? No. Yes. The 10 commandments of what not to do prior to closing for a buyer. Have we all had them where they freaking quit or switched their job and you're like, or they went and they financed like all their car?
Someone went and bought a car.
Yes. So you need to, like, if you just tell them, these are all the things that you should not do, basically until closing, you can buy groceries and gas and go to work and keep your job. That's what you need to do. And until then, no fun. And then after, go on that awesome vacation. Okay? So I just find if you tell people, it will be better for you because when do we get paid? Closing, right? All right, so then you've got everything you've got your dot loop all filled out, and now you have a bound agreement. So this sales checklist, I think I've just added this in where it pulls in with all the new loops now, because I noticed like last week when I was working on this, it did not. So when you have a pending file, you need to fill this document out. Okay, so whenever I've got a pending file, I will pull up, what is the buyer one called? When you first fill it out for the admin to fill out all your buyer docs.
Offer checklist.
Thank you. Yes. The offer checklist. So I will pull that document up plus this one at the same time because you can just copy and paste like all of that top stuff. And it works out really well. And then you submit it over, and I now added like a little notes section down here because I always had notes that I was telling Megan, like I'm still waiting on the earnest money from the other side, or I'm still waiting, he's sending the earnest money in or whatever, okay? So then you're gonna share the file with them. So this is huge. This is how to make sure, does anybody know what BAF is minus Tabby? Anyone? Okay, what is it, Tabby?
Buyer agency fee.
It's buyer agency fee. So we really now call this just an agency fee, but in-house, if you see that acronym, that is what that means, okay? So say the lender is not IMG. All right, so you have to, as soon as you go binding, this is key, all right? You're going to call the lender and say, hey, Benita, because I literally had this is the conversation I had with Benita. Hey, Benita, this is Holly at Kings of Real Estate. She had already been working with me on Mark's pre-approval. Thanks for getting me that pre-qual letter for Life Changers Outreach so quickly. I wanted to let you know the awesome news. We're officially under contract. My assistant is working on processing the file and going to send that to you ASAP. I also wanted you to know that a part of our awesome VIP buyer program, we give our buyers a 2-year buyback guarantee and we get them a 1-year home warranty. So in order to provide these awesome additional benefits, we work at 4% of the purchase price and a $9.97 transaction fee. And I've gotten the seller to cover all of that for the buyer through their 1% seller paid closing costs. So I just wanted to point that out up front, that the 1% from the seller will be covering their agency and transaction fee. Okay, do you know what the response always is from the lender? Legit. It is, huh? I don't get it. It literally, every time I have called, so you have got to expect they're gonna go, what? So you legitimately say, absolutely, that is exactly why I wanted you to call. Or why I wanted to call. Because if you do not have this conversation, they then take that 1% and they are going to put that on their, an LE? Their loan estimate. And they are going to put that 1% onto their fees. They're going to take your money and put it onto their fees. I learned this freaking lesson the hard way when I was at the beach about 3 years ago and having to fight with a lender. And did I call him? Nope. Didn't call him. It was freaking with like SunTrust or something. It was, a nightmare. And they had disclosed to my guy and taken all of, I think I had to get like 1.5%. And they took all of the 1.5% and moved it over to their lender fees and then disclosed it to him like that. And so now you can't add my fees on top of it. And it was a nightmare of a deal, and I ate it because I did it wrong, okay? So this is why I call every single time, and I'll say, absolutely, that's why I wanted to call with our awesome VIP buyer program, and you just reiterate it. Like, Tracy gives all of our buyers a 2-year buyback guarantee because he wants them to have the assurance that we are selling them a good house. We get them a 1-year home warranty, so we have a 4% fee that we charge. And the $997, at that point, this was $697 last year. So we got the seller to cover that completely for the buyer. So I want you to know the buyer is not paying it, the seller is paying it for them. And they then, like, they'll nod and, well, I don't see them, but they're like, okay, I get it. Thank you for calling, okay? And you have to have this conversation. If you do not, you will not get it. It will go away and it will be moved from being an agency fee to being for title or for being for the lender. I promise you 100% of the time, okay?
So it should be, so if they ask what line item does this go on, do we just say agency fees?
They will know what to do on their side of things. Yep, they will know exactly what to do. So VA, all right. This is what I freaking love because the TAR agreement is so awesome. So on VA, because I had this conversation with Peyton probably about a year ago, and he said, if he were to ever call in and ask his underwriter, hey, can the buyer pay an agency fee or transaction fee? The answer is always unequivocally going to be no. Like, so you don't ever ask, okay? So about 10 days or so prior to closing, you're gonna want to request the prelim settlement statement from title to review, all right? Most likely it's gonna be close to closing, and that is when, because I've had this happen multiple times, and when it's not been an IMG deal, and I wasn't able to flip them over. And the lender calls me, and they will call you as the buyer's agent, and they say, gosh, we've got a problem. I can't put that $25.96 on the buyer's side of the settlement statement. And I'm like, at this point in time, I had never read the second page of the VA addendum, you know, where you put the closing costs there. I had always wondered, why are we putting this there? It's like, what is the point of this? Well, it covers our freaking tail for buyer agency fee. So you tell them, absolutely, I totally understand. Can you pull up the FHA VA addendum? And we're gonna read it. So who wants to read this? Anybody? Sarah, you always read for us.
Non-allowable settlement charges or closing costs. In the event of settlement charges or closing costs at time of closing, which are deemed to be non-allowable, non-chargeable to the buyer, pursuant to the governmental guidelines. Seller agrees to pay at closing, evidenced by delivery of warranty deed and payment of purchase price, such non-allowable settlement charges or closing costs on behalf of buyer at a sum not to exceed $28.50.
Yes, you can stop there.
Oh, okay.
Do you see this? This is like the golden grail for us with VA. Like, do you understand what this is saying? Okay, clearly you do not, and clearly you have never lost your VA fee. Okay, so this is literally saying, because we are getting everybody to sign off, everybody knows the TAR VA FHA addendum. Buyer and seller are signing this while we're going through and at contract, okay? So this number is always going to be the exact number that you are asking for in total closing costs. Now on this deal, I think, how did I do this? Yes, I was just, this is the deal that I did with George. George paid all of his closing costs, and then I got this extra and paid only our agency fee and transaction fee, okay? So if George was asking for 6% and say this total was going to be, I don't know, $8,000, I'm going to write $8,000 here. even though some of it's going to go towards his lender and title and some of it's going to go towards buyer agency fee. Does that make sense? Like this number always matches whatever your total requested closing cost amount is on the purchase and sale agreement.
So if they counter back and the number's different, do you need to?
Yes, you need to make sure that that number is the same. Now, as long as if the number is different and say you are getting a portion, like say I was getting 7,500 and 5,000 of it was going towards his lender and title, as long as my amount is now in this line, I will be covered. But it's better just to have it match on both documents.
Is this for VA or FHA as well?
This is VA. Yeah, because VA is the one that comes back and says, buyers can't pay this agency fee. Buyers can't pay this transaction fee. But I've had deals go through where the agency fee and transaction fee were on the buyer side. And then I've had deals go through where they are not, okay? So for the deals where they are not, so you're reading this to the lender and you're saying, in the event of a settlement charge or closing cost is deemed to be non-allowable to the buyer, down here, line 44, seller agrees to pay at closing such non-allowable settlement charges. The seller is already agreeing to pay non-allowables right there. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's wonderful. And this will crop up, like I have had to call other title companies for other agents on our deal. And I remember sitting in the parking lot in McDonald's, like on speakerphone with Fountain City Finance, who is not a lender that I would recommend using. And they were having like a team meeting. And I'm asking them, so is there some law I am not aware of that says that the VA buyers can't pay for their own closing costs? And they're like, no. And I said, okay, well, I need you to pull this up and I need you to see that we can get paid our buyer agency fee. And I think it was Zach's deal or something. And so it went through. And so I've used this multiple times. So just be aware that they are not going to be aware of it and you need to be aware of it. Okay? Any questions? Comments? Concerns?
First time this happens, we just call you.
Yes. Yes, this is why you've got a mentor, but yeah, absolutely, I am here. But if you will just make sure that this number matches on what your number is on the purchase and sale agreement, I can help you at the end. Now, if this is zeroed out, then that's when we've got like a huge problem, okay? That's when no bueno. But yes, I do not expect you to remember every single thing. And you will also have access to this. So you can go back if you're needing to put yourself to sleep, okay? Okay, so that is basically the conversation I just told you that I've got, okay? So that we did yesterday. There was your homework. Oh, okay. Let's get into inspections. Let me ask you guys, what key points do you pre-frame during inspections?
Every house has something wrong with it. It's just a matter of, are you willing to overlook it? Are you willing to fix it? Are you willing to have the seller fix it?
Nice. I like it. Okay, good.
I say the inspector is going to point out every single little thing, even
Yes.
if it's a blown light bulb. So you're going to get a list that looks ridiculous,
Yes.
but most of it, 90% of it is easy.
Very good. Sorry, Matt.
Now, I did have an inspector who scares my
Totally
life.
fine, if you're saying it.
Yeah. Yes, I know they legitimately do. Absolutely. So you definitely want to have these because who of us have had deals go awry due to inspections? Anyone? Anyone here? Yes. And you about want to murder someone. That's why it's so important to utilize our inspectors and why it's so important that as soon as you go under contract, you're saying, hey, my assistant is processing the file, they're getting all your inspections ordered, because you're not even giving them the option. It's just like, we're just moving forward. Okay, so yes, you definitely want to say, and then so once inspections have gotten scheduled, I say something like, hey, Mr. Buyer, inspections are scheduled for Friday. Once those inspections are complete, the inspector is going to send us an email to pay for it online, release the report. If you've got any questions, feel free to call. Remember, there's no perfect house. We're looking for major items. We don't want to nitpick the seller to death. What Matt said, what Jessica said, that's great. So notice you are not giving them the option to be present during inspections. Like, you're not saying this. How many of us, when we worked for other companies, went to your inspections? Yes. Did you not go?
We told them the last like 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just to go over the report.
Good. Awesome. So we try not to go at all because it is a total waste of time. Like, I am not a home inspector and you're not a home inspector, right? So it's if they were to bring it up and say, oh, I'd really like to be there. Like my father-in-law, when I sold them a house last year, and he is meticulous. Maybe he is a very high C. And it's like, I knew I wasn't getting away with, hey, Steve, you're not going over there. Steve like freaking camped out and like watched either Mark or Nick do the inspections, and you just smile and nod and move on. So there are going to be those guys, but if you can help it, you're going to say, okay, absolutely. The best way to do that is to show up at the end of inspections, and they're going to take about 15 minutes to go over everything with you. I actually did say this to Steve. I think he still showed up during the entire thing, but yeah. So, and then you're going to pre-frame. It's going to take about 24 hours to get the inspection report back. Once ready, you're going to receive the link to pay for it, blah, blah, blah. No perfect house. If there is some items on the report that you'd like to negotiate through the seller, best practice is to try to work out a concession in lieu of repairs. That way you know that those items, if there are any, are fixed the way you want them to be fixed post-closing. And my rule of thumb is to always, I would rather die than have the sellers do fixes. Well, has anybody had experiences with those? Yes.
My father's last flip.
Mm-hmm.
So the buyer wanted him to fix a lot of different things.
Yes.
And, my dad's a great handyman. He thinks he's Bob Vila, but sometimes he's not. So when he said he would fix everything,
Mm-hmm.
you get a little nervous.
Yeah. How did your final walkthrough go?
We're fine.
Good. Because usually they are a nightmare. Like if you've got like a 30-point punch list. So to make your life as easy as possible, you just want to do concession in lieu of repairs. I mean, it's just because when you go through final walkthrough and there's still, I don't know, a light bulb out or whatever it is, or there's still that crack that I can see, or it's just, you're like a day or hours before closing, and then everybody's scrambling, and then you're having to escrow money, and it's just a nightmare. So if you tell the buyer, hey, what's in it for you? You get to fix it the way you like it to be done with the subs that you want. Now, are there those deals where obviously it's like the appraiser catches things and they have to be fixed prior to closing? Sure. But it's that's life safety issues, okay? So let's talk about a short appraisal. Who's ever had a short appraisal? Anybody? Oh, they're so fun. Okay, so if you've never had one, what do you think your options are when you get the short appraisal back?
Counter back.
Yep.
Use that appraisal contingency and say, hey, we're going to need you to come down.
Yep. Yeah, you use absolutely on the buy side. So what are the options? Like, how can you get together on price? So I'll tell you one recently I just had a couple of weeks ago. We were under contract at $360,500. Appraisal comes back at $344,000. What are our options?
Bill can give you upgrades of some type.
It was I've got the seller, and it's regular people. So,
Come down on price.
okay, so the seller covers the whole price difference, okay?
Or you can give more towards closing costs or concessions.
So the lender is now only going to finance the buyer based on $344,000. End of story.
Increase down payment.
Yep, so the buyer would bring some, right? Okay. Anything else?
Meet in the middle.
Meet in the middle, so buyer and seller can do stuff. Who else has money in it? We do. Okay. So these are your options, and I am not advocating an us thing. So the seller matches the appraisal price. This is what most buyer's agents are going to want. If you're on the list side, this is what they're going to want to do. Now, in the cabin market that is so crazy, it's awesome to be on the list side because you're like, dude, if you don't buy it, I'm just waiting for the next cash guy. And you're lucky I even took your deal because I should have taken a cash offer and not taken a contingency on a loan. So I have definitely had where the buyer brings all the extra money to the table. I think Tanner's had one where the buyer brought 40 grand or something to the table. You can do a meet in the middle. Agents can negotiate your commission. So this is where you would want to discuss this with me first, okay? And then also on appraisal, so the appraiser is checking for two things. They are checking for any life safety issues, and they are checking for value to be there, okay? So if there were repairs that the appraiser required, those are non-negotiables. They have to be done. Someone has to do them prior to closing. And it doesn't always have to be the seller, okay? So it can be the buyer doing the repairs, the seller doing some, the buyer doing some. So I had one about a year or so ago where it came in short and with repairs. And so the seller actually came down to meet the price and the buyer said, hey, we'll do the repairs. So it's just all what buyer and seller agree to. Yes.
I was told too that you can ask the appraiser to see the comps that they pulled.
Yes.
So that you can see where they got that number from.
Absolutely. You definitely want to check comps for sure. And there are a lot, I've never won an appraisal rebuttal, but that doesn't mean you can't. And you definitely should, because you're going to have a copy of it because it's your buyer. So you definitely want to check comps, but usually the appraiser is, I just have never won one. So that is your first step, and then you've got to figure out how to hold deals together. Okay. You can ask your buyer for it as the buyer's agent. Yeah. And they can send it to you.
Holly, on repairs, so like a VA, just got a report yesterday on the inspection, and it's a VA loan.
Yeah.
And there's some things that probably VA will be asking for. And it's 17 items
Right.
that Nick found on the inspection. And some of them, not super serious, but do I ask for all 17 of those things? Because I'm afraid VA is not going to pass it.
So that is a great question. Yes.
I'm freaking out here.
Yeah.
Oh,
No. So when I go through inspections, because you've got conventional is so nice because it's appraisal, they're going to be fine unless you're going to walk off the deck and fall to your death. They're usually pretty okay. But FHA and VA, and then obviously your THDA, USDA guys, they've got stricter guidelines. So what I always I get through inspections first with the buyer, and it's what is it that brings you concern if you're my buyer, Sarah? And if they're looking at the stuff and it's well, for you as the buyer, these items are non-negotiable, these 5 out of the 17. Okay, so I would definitely recommend that we ask the seller for a concession for those items, because what I can tell you is, yes, the appraiser is coming in after and he is going to look for life safety issues, but it is a matter of one person's opinion. You send in 5 appraisers and you will get 5 different opinions on value and 5 different opinions on if there are life safety issues or not. And so you can't, I have had where we have gotten through inspections, and then I think I had one with Mark. And And he was like, there is a light switch in the shower. He's like, that is never gonna pass. And I was sweating it out, man, because I've got the buyer and they're about to have a baby, and I've got their house sold and it's a cash buyer and they're freaking gonna be homeless, and I'm like, oh Lord Jesus. And so, and he was the VA guy I asked for the 9% on. And so I'm all nervous about it. And do you know the appraiser goes in, didn't catch the light switch. Like, doesn't even care about the light switch. I had one recently where I was the listing agent, and I was sure that it would never go FHA. I was positive because it had peeling paint on the exterior, and you walk out on the deck and you're like, freaking this deck is gonna like fall through. And so the lender who was for the buyer, she was like, listen, if something happens, I know a workaround. And so my people were okay with it. And the FHA appraiser goes in, and guess what he catches? Nothing. Literally nothing. And I was like, okay. So now I've come to the point, like this last short appraisal that I just got about a week or so ago, I would have sworn on anything, we're not gonna get a short appraisal, it's gonna be fine. And what does it do? It comes in 16.5 short. So what I tell my people is, when we get there, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and if it's a problem, we'll figure it out. But I'm not going to try to figure out what an appraiser is gonna call for or not. So the answer is, what is it that is concerning to you on the home inspection? Then you're trying to get them to ask for a concession in lieu of in repairs. Now, if it's something like the HVAC is out, you know, like things that are just, but if they're things that could be questionable if the appraiser is going to catch it or not, I'm going for a concession. And then if I'm on the buy side and the appraiser catches it, well, he's gonna have to fix it anyways, right?
I'll show it to you later, because they're on a cruise, and
Yeah.
I got to talk to them just for a short time before they got back on the boat.
Yes,
They wanted everything fixed.
yeah,
It's like GFIs and get the propane tanks out of the garage, because they're not supposed to be in there.
yeah,
Things like, they said, we want everything because we want to pass this, we want this home.
yeah. And I think you've got to use that thing where it's one person's opinion. Like Nick is not an appraiser. So what the appraiser is going to catch, they're just different guidelines than what an inspector is going to point out. And so it's whatever is a concern for you to buy this house. Don't worry about the appraisal. That's what I tell
Yeah,
people.
I'm not so worried about that, it's just VA, but they want everything fixed.
Yeah, now if they want everything fixed, like you have to, and my rule of thumb is to try to get people to do concessions. But if they're like, no, Sarah, I want the seller to fix this. I mean, you have to do what is ever your client is lawfully asking you to do.
He's want it fixed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. So are there going to be times where you know better and your client doesn't do what you tell them? Yes, that's a day in the life of real estate, and you just need to do it. I mean, Tanner and I have been on calls before with some of our OSAs, and they're like, we are not going to do this. We are not going to write this up. And we're like, well, what did they ask you to write? And they tell us. And yeah, it is dumb, like what they're asking, but it's like, they're not asking you to go sell meth out of your trunk. Like, you can go, you have to.
You can't do that though, just.
You can't sell meth?
No, don't do that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just wanna make that, yes,
In general.
yeah. If you're at Kings of Real Estate.
No
for
meth.
Guaranteed Realty team thing, no meth.
No match, okay.
Okay.
We sell meth houses. Is that not?
Well, you have to disclose,
Yeah.
Just on cool.
yeah.
So you have to do whatever they are asking you to do. Because
Lawfully.
that's where, yes, whatever they are lawfully asking you to do, because that's where you will flip over, and then we get the critical mass calls and they are saying, I don't feel like Sarah is representing me. Like she's just arguing with me. Like there's a point where you advise and then they are adults and they make the decision. Do not argue with them because you will get yourself fired, okay? It's just, and you will not get repeats, you will not get referrals, and they will not like you. And you are a very likable person.
And we
Yeah.
gave them 20 days because of the cruise.
Yeah.
So on
Good.
repair and also the 5 days
Good.
for negotiations.
That's perfect. That's awesome. So this was my short appraisal that recently just came in, and Tanner actually helped me with it. So it came. We were at contract at $360,500. The appraisal came in at $344. The difference is $16,500. This changed a bit from what we ended up doing, but there ended up being the seller dropped a lot. We were also negotiating with some inspections as well. So the buyer did negotiate some stuff. And then if the listing agent is asking you to help with commissions, what do you think you need to do?
Call
On
you.
you.
Yes! Oh my gosh, you guys are so good. And if you can't get me, who else should you call?
Tanner.
Yeah, your mentor.
Me? The answer is no on commission.
Yeah.
So,
No, because the thing is, like, talk it through, because your mentor is probably going to have some good ideas, because guess what? I'm going to be like in trainings or something's going to happen. But always remember too that the world is not on fire. Like currently, I've got a deal going on where the title company, Tennessee Land Title, who I do not care for, but my sellers are with Smoky Mountain Title. What are you looking
I don't
weird?
know, you're just like on camera talking like that. And it's
Oh,
like-
you can edit out these things.
I can literally do anything.
he's actually going to just delete all this entire segment.
Cats with lasers coming out of their eyes and tackling them.
Okay, that would be awesome.
We probably need to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, let's see, they are sure that this large shed is not on my seller's property. So she calls me freaking out yesterday and like sent Tracy something. It was on agent channel. And so I call her last night and I'm like, hey, I'll find out about it. I look at the survey last night and it's like the shed is clearly on the property, but I haven't had time to call her. So she's like blowing up my phone, freaking out. Well, guess what's going to happen when I call her tonight? Like, no one's going to die in the time from right now until I call her tonight. Like, it is going to be okay. Now, are there some things where it is like you've got a time? Sure. But I've got like a deal that is blowing up right now. And it's like, all right, I'll get to you, Sarah. Her name is Sarah. I'll get to you, Sarah, after this meeting, okay? Because it's going to be okay. So you would call me. So now, based on this scenario, if the buyer is agreeing to bring $5,000 more, how much is the buyer's down payment now? Can anybody run the math? Do you know how to figure out what the buyer's, because you're the buyer's agent, and so the buyer is saying, okay, I'll bring $5,000. All right, Misty, how much is my down payment and my $5,000 now?
So off the appraisal value?
Mm-hmm. Because the lender is only going to lend based on appraisal.
33.
Yes, it is 39.4.
Yeah,
Right,
so
because
10% of 344.
10% of the 344 is 34.4 plus 5,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to do it this way so that you could see, like, as the buyer's agent, like, this is now what you would have to bring plus your closing costs. All right, so now you figured that out. So what amendments do you think you need to write up? And what do they need to say?
No change in price, change in.
So what amendment does that go on?
Amendment to the purchase and sale agreement.
Good. Very good. So it's going to say something like, what's the verbiage that I'm putting on there?
Appraisal came in at 344. Just basically like how you have it there, 16.5 is the difference. Am I on the right track?
The appraiser is, the amendment is just going to the lender and title. So all you have to say is, Tabby, you've written tons of these. What do you think?
Purchase price to be, your sales price to be $344.
Yep, that's all
Okay,
you have to
that's
do.
it. Okay.
You don't have to explain. You don't have to give the whole long drawn out story. You just have to write it like that. So that's one amendment. And then what other amendment do you think you need? Or it's not an amendment, but what other document?
Notification.
You would have done that before because you would have notified the other side that there was a short. That's right. What do you think?
Comp agreement,
A comp agreement. Why?
because the commission's getting reduced on each side.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. What do you think your comp agreement, what is the amount now? Say you have this, obviously you're the buyer's agent, so you've got this at 4%. So what is my comp agreement for?
Oh, well, didn't you say we have it at 4,000 and then?
No. The next slide. Yes. You are constantly using your phones to do math. What is the math that you're doing?
So we have it at 4%, which is 13,760, so we're gonna get.
How did you get that though?
4% of what?
344.
Yes. Okay. Does everybody get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you guys have the spirit. Yeah.
No,
Just minus 1,000, so he needs to get 12,760.
Yes. Perfect. Sorry.
So would we just write that out algebraically on the document or something like that, or would you write it?
You just write the answer on the document,
Okay.
on the comp agreement.
Because on the comp agreement, it has a flat fee. So you will just put it in as a flat fee now. Okay. So you're definitely going to want to get that signed. All right. So good. Good job. That is how you get to all of that. So let's talk about waivers. All right. So obviously we know the transaction fee is $9.97 and it is never going to be waived. Does everyone know, I mean, because some of us are new, a portion of the transaction fee goes to fund the monthly admin bonus pool. Who wants to explain the admin bonus pool? Does anybody know anything about it? Why it's good for you?
Encouragement.
Encouragement? Yeah, for sure. How are we motivated?
Money.
Money, for sure. They are different. They are, different. They aren't like totally money driven. But think about last year, we helped 504 families, and Tracy then goes to the admin department and is like, guess what? We're going to help 750 families this year. And they're like, great, that sounds awesome. So same amount of pay and like 3 times more work. That'll be great. Oh, and guess what? Your department is only going to be 3 now. It's going to be awesome. So when this happened and we implemented the bonus pool, I can tell you there was a dramatic difference of the type. The admin team was always good, but it's like now they've got a bonus pool that every month that they are getting a portion, they are getting a good chunk of money. And so now they are right on board with us helping 750 families, okay? So if it looks like, that is why it's never going to be waived. On repeats, referrals, SOIs, I don't care if it's your mom. Like I recently did one and I paid the $9.97. I bought condos, I paid the $9.97, okay? So if it looks like there's going to be an issue collecting 4%, you've got to call me prior to going binding to discuss all options. If you go binding on a contract without talking to me and you didn't collect the 4%, it will not be waived ever in any circumstance because you didn't even loop me in to try to help, okay? And then in the instance of a short appraisal, and if it's suggested for the buyer's agent to help, it needs to be discussed with me prior to agreeing. And there are cases where you decide to put the deal together and the company will be paid based on the 4% collected. Can you give me some examples of when you think this might be? Like you're just putting together a deal and I don't know if anybody's had this, so maybe not. Can you think about when this might be?
Maybe like a young couple, first time buying and don't have much money in their pocket.
Well, that would actually be one you'd want to discuss with me because we do understand that first time buyers with no money, it can be difficult. So I'll just tell you. So these are some where I've eaten it, okay? This is not the company eating it, this is me, because I was putting the deal together. All right, so last year, I helped my in-laws buy a house, and because they were family, and because there are different things that have happened, I personally made the decision that I would take the co-broke offered, and cover their transaction fee, okay? Like that was my personal decision. Tracy is telling me this is what you should collect, but if you want to be like that for your family, totally fine, but you still need to pay the company, okay? So I found them a FSBO, and the owner would only pay 2.24%. It was like the weirdest percentage ever. And so I paid the company what was owed, and I literally made like $750 on the deal because it was my personal decision to do that for my in-laws. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is why it is super important, especially for friends and family when you're signing them up, to sit down and go through everything and make sure that they're on board with it. Sarah, I know you've done this several times with your SOIs. So another deal I had, in order to hold it together through inspections, and I did not want to go, I didn't want to go back out to market. I just wanted to hold it together. I personally kicked in $1,000 because I'm like, this is not worth it. My time is not worth, so I can move the heck on with my life. But don't call me up and say, Holly, I want the company to help eat it. Because the thing is, I could have killed this deal and found somebody else and put it back together. I just didn't want to do it. I was like deal weary. Has anybody ever been deal weary? Where you're just like, I am done and I want to move on. Okay, so then there is Milt's deal. This is where, so these were different, like this was family, the Conrads I was deal weary with. Milt's deal, I just straight up made a mistake, okay?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In-laws? All right, so, because I'm gonna be in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, they only paid 2.24, it was obviously your SOI, so King's got their 997, but.
This was last year, so it's $697, and our splits were 50-50,
Okay, so,
or they are.
but what happens because you didn't get the 3.5 last year, was it 3.5 last year? And then you pay, so as long as King's got the 997, and since it was your SOI, you're just making nothing, but
Basically.
King's isn't gonna go charge you 1% because.
Well, no, I collected, like, see that point, like, because my SOI, it's 4%, well, I have to pay King's 2%, right, as an SOI. And then a portion of it covered the rest of the $697, and then what was left over is $750.
Okay.
Like, I covered enough to pay King's like I got 4%.
I got, okay, I see.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, otherwise I would like,
Be in the negative.
you would be in the
Okay.
negative for sure. So does everybody understand that? And that's because I made the personal decision for my in-laws to do that, okay? Now you do not have to do that if you do not want to. You can charge your family extra because sometimes you should, okay? Yes, they deserve to pay extra. Okay, so we're gonna go to Milt's deal, and I wanna show you some things. Before we review his settlement statement, I want you to know that as the buyer's agent, it will make, and I think Smoky Mountain Title does this pretty much across the board, but I always like to remind them, you always want a split settlement statement. Why is that? The answer is right there.
Yeah, so the buyer doesn't see what the seller has, the seller sees what the buyer has.
Yeah, you've got that. But it's more that the seller doesn't see, like, so they have agreed to give a credit of, say, $2,500. So that credit, so then the seller, it's more the agent on the other side, because I have literally had this happen where it was on the same side. So the seller gave $2,500, and then the listing agent saw that that $2,500 was going towards a buyer agency fee, okay? And so he almost killed the deal. And at that point in time, like, we were doing TK for a day, and I walk in and I'm like, Tracy, I cannot get this thing together. And he's like, give me the phone. So he talks to the guy, and he's like, if your seller doesn't sign, we will sue you for commissions owed. Let him know that, because he's already agreed to this amount, and they decided to put the $2,500 on a buyer agency fee, so the buyer can direct where it's going. But if you ask for a split settlement statement, meaning the seller just sees their side and the buyer sees their side, the listing agent is never going to see where that money is being directed to until after closing, if they even actually review it, because they do get a copy of it after everybody's signed. Does that make sense? Okay.
So speaking of closing.
Yeah.
I know we do this, but I know back in, when I used to have to go to closings, we would close in other rooms typically.
Mhm.
Is that something agents are still doing now, or can we close together if we all get along, or should
Yeah.
we, or thoughts? Because I know Smoky Mountain Title has those 2 rooms. Like,
Mhm.
I'm getting, everything's going great, but
Yeah.
I just didn't know if y'all thought that would be a good idea.
It's what I think each deal, you just roll with it. Yeah. I think for the most part, people are fine closing together. But actually we go over if you even need to go to closing, okay? Like, is closing a money-making activity? Can you skip closing and still get a 5-star review? Yes. So just some different things to look at. Let's see. All right, I need to take a snapshot of this so I can, because Milt's deal was complicated. All right. So this is where I screwed up on Milt's deal. Milt Wells, the highest high C I have possibly ever met. He makes my father-in-law look like a not high C. This is, so Milt, this is my 6th deal last year I had done with Milt. He keeps coming back to me because every other agent fires him. Before this deal, I had an agent in Sevierville call me and she's like, I can't handle him anymore. Will you take him and pay me a referral? I was like, no, I do not even want him. I'm not taking him and then giving you money for him. I'm like, absolutely not. We are not doing that. So he had tried to use another agent, and then he was trying to buy these houses in outlining areas. This one you'll notice is in Russellville, Tennessee. Have no idea where this house is. I've never been to it. So Milt calls me up and he's like, Holly, this was like his 3rd time trying to get a flip house. They're trying to move here from New York. And he's like, all of these other agents, they're idiots. And I'm like, well, okay. Yeah. And he said he tried to negotiate with the listing agent. She could not get him the house. So he calls me up. I want this house. I want to get it. And I said, okay, Milt. So at this point, we've done so many deals. I said, Milt, I'm going to level with you and tell you, if I'm your buyer's agent, I am getting paid $5,000. Period. End of story to get you this house. It doesn't matter what's on the MLS. If there's a difference, I'm going to work to get it covered by the seller. But if the seller won't cover it, you're paying the rest of it. Because I'm like, I freaking needed to have charged Milt like $10,000 for this deal. It was such a nightmare. Okay. So he's like, that's fine. That's fine. I just want the house. So I was like, okay, great. So the house was $8,500, okay, or $85,000. So we bumped it up to cover his agency fee. So the seller credit is here, all right? So this is why you're asking for split settlement statements, because this is what the seller sees. So all they're going to see is this debit here, okay? And they're going to see, okay, yeah, I'm paying the commission, and here are my title fees. And then the seller is concerned about this, okay? So this is my balance, what I'm getting, the 77.8 almost, okay? So then if you do split, this is where then it's getting credited to the buyer, and then down here, it is getting credited to Kings of Real Estate as a buyer agency fee. Does everybody see how that works? So before he bought this house, in Russellville, I had sold 2 of his side-by-side cabins that were in Sevierville. Okay, I had helped him buy them a couple of years prior, and then he called me. He's like, the market's up. Let's go ahead and sell them. So we sell them, and guess who forgets to go out and get pictures of the propane tank reading? Yours truly. Guess who remembers that he was not credited $421.15 post-closing? Milt Wells, okay? So we're in the middle of negotiating this deal, and he's like, Holly, if you can get the buyer of my deal of my cabins to pay us that, then I'm fine. Well, they had almost sued each other during that deal. And so I knew that, I tried, and I was like, hey, are you going to send that for 21.15? She was like, screw you. So I said, no problem. So I told Milt, I said, listen, I'm going to make it up to you. We'll just remove it from the commission. So my mistake, I was the one that forgot to go take the pictures of the propane tank gauge to turn it into the title company to prorate the gas. So I eat the 421.15, okay? So there are going to be times you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, all right? There is no water, sorry, man. Well, I called yesterday.
So you're not in charge of that stuff?
Clearly not. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that brings up, because of my mistake on propane tanks, I wanted to make sure, one of the things you should do if you're new in real estate is read the contracts. I know it sounds crazy. Matt, you've probably read them front and back since you have C10. Really? Okay.
So my C and S is pretty much right there, 1/3.
Okay, that's
I
good.
did go to CAR's contracts class.
Yeah,
So that helps.
it was probably good. Yeah.
If you haven't, it's a good thing. I mean, even if you don't read them, or if you do read them, it's good to refresh it every year or two.
Yes, it absolutely is. So you definitely I want everybody to know, because whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, it is in here that the propane gas will be prorated at the balance of closing. So if the, let's see, where is it?
So Holly, something that you guys could have done at the time,
Yes.
and I had this happen to me. I had the buyer, and the seller agent forgot to get the gauge reading. So the listing agent said, okay, well, I guess they don't want the propane tanks then, so we'll just have the seller call and they'll have them removed.
So it was post-closing and she had already switched.
Everything had already happened.
That's a good idea, though.
Yeah. You pay it, or we'll just have it sent back to the company. We'll get the credit, what's in there.
That's
So
a great idea.
I was like, crap, okay.
Yeah.
So I called my dude, I was like, they're going to take the tanks unless you pay for it. He's like, all right. So we tried.
Was that pre-closing?
Yeah. Actually, we had already signed, but it didn't fund. Nothing had funded yet, so they were
Okay.
still waiting. It was like $900.
Yeah.
So it was.
And he hadn't transferred the lease into his name yet. Oh, that's good. So see, there are times when you make mistakes, and that's why you should post them on Agent Channel to see if somebody has come across something.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, try this.
Yep.
Like, there's 23, 4 of us on the team. Like, we've all run up against something. So, okay, very good. All right, I'm going to finish this segment out, and then we are going to take a bathroom break. But what I want to say from the beginning, when I said there are going to be mistakes made along the way, and what I'm expecting is that we learn from them. Like, I know now, I remember propane gauges, or now I'm going to use Tanner's trick. That's awesome.
It was my buyer, so we were trying
Yeah.
to not pay it.
Right.
And the
I
seller's
know.
agent was like, they can pay it, or we'll just have them removed. Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. It's like, Jeff, dude, you got to pay the propane tank. So I tried, man.
So then on the flip side, you've got to know if there are mistakes, expect that if it's your mistake or you didn't negotiate it well in order to hit the minimum fees, the cost will come out of your commission. So let's hear from you all. Any mistakes that you've made that you want to share that we could learn from? Jessica?
I was working like 3 VA deals at the same time,
Yeah.
and they were my first 3 for VA.
Oh, wow.
And I got about a week into like almost to closing with the first one, and I realized that I didn't make sure that I had both lender and title percentages counted into it.
Gotcha.
And I had done it on all 3 of them, where I only got quotes from the lender.
Yes.
And fortunately, Veterans United was like, we count for both. I was like, oh, but I had 2 days of like panic where I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to eat these percentages that I didn't account for? And I didn't want to tell my team because I was like, that is a large mistake if I made that.
Yeah, it can be. And that's why having,
Numbers.
yes, having those discussions with people, if you know that it's going to be tight for them on closing costs, you want to have those conversations with their lender, with them. So good. Any other mistakes anybody's made?
Yeah, I was pretty new into real estate,
Mm-hmm.
and it was my first foreclosure deal.
Mm-hmm.
And on the paperwork from Penny Mac, which is just really horrible to work with,
Mm-hmm.
in California, it looked like, we put an offer of $130,000 on this cabin. And it looked like $130,000 on their paperwork that came back, but it was $139,000. And we accepted it and all that. The lender didn't even catch it.
Oh,
and-
geez.
Yeah, so in the end, the listing agent that deals with a lot of different foreclosures on the listing side, he got it pushed through at 130, and this was
Oh,
just
wow.
like days before. And I said, look, Andy, I said, this thing has been on the market way over a year. I said, do they not want their money?
Yeah.
I said, how did all of us miss this? Me, my buyers, and the lender, and the people that checked the contracts. We
Yeah.
all missed it. It just looked like 130, and so they worked it out. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't want to pay that out of my pocket.
Yeah, you would really be paying on that one, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it worked out. And I think the moral of the story is most things do work out. And if they don't, like no one dies, you still go home. It's still going to be okay.
I've had so many times where I've just screwed up. I mean, it happens. You're gonna screw up. I sold that dude's furniture. I told you guys about that yesterday. I mean,
That's horrible.
that AJ's dealing one currently with a seller who said, no, I'm taking the TVs out of the cabin once it sells. And that wasn't ever discussed, and he took the TVs. So now what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just stuff that you just deal with. I'm like, well, I guess you're buying TVs, dude.
Yeah.
It sucks, but you got to get TVs in there.
Yeah, he had one. I don't know how it worked out, but where he was with Dollywood, and Dollywood, the rental company. So if you have a listing and they are with, what is their?
It's just Dollywood rental cabins.
Yeah, they will hold your sellers to
It's a 6 month contract. It's actually in the deed. It's deeded to the rental company.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's brutal.
So you've got to there are things, because most rental companies, it's just in their contract saying, hey, you're going to give me 6 months or this much time. Well, they don't have anything to hold you on. So I was wondering how they were holding it on.
It's in the deed.
It's in the deed.
When they were originally built, this is who it's with, this is what they're doing, this is for how long. If you transfer ownership, you can buy out the contract for 90% of what it's worth, whatever the amount is. It's bad. It's big.
Yeah. Big league.
Big league.
Yeah.
This one isn't mine, but it was former coworkers.
Yeah.
And it was a foreclosure, it was a farm,
Mm-hmm.
and the state said there was around 10 acres with this. Well, they go and they check all the Tennessee MLS, or no, maybe not the MLS, but the property database and all that kind of stuff. And the state had it wrong. Instead of 10 acres, it was 5.
Oh.
However, they just used all the state documents. No one got a survey on it. So whomever bought it thought it was 10 acres,
Yeah.
but then it's 5. And then so you can guess what happens. Goes into court, insurance deeds.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So, I mean, it seems like everybody did their due diligence with the exception of the buyer getting a survey.
Yes.
But being that it was only 5 when it was advertised as 10,
Yeah. That's huge. So it was going back on the listing agent, or, okay. Yeah. And as the buyer's agent, what's a good document to have your buyers fill out to cover you on survey?
Get a home inspection and survey and radon test.
Yep.
I did not even catch that change this year with my first buyer because I've known that form for so long. And I didn't look at the third spot, and he was like, what's this radon test? I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was like, this is totally new, like a week into January, I had no
Yes.
idea.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is definitely a nice old CYA document for sure. So, well, let's take a quick break and we will get back, okay?